ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's webcast entitled The Do's and Don'ts of Social ROI, Question and Answer with Gary Vaynerchuk. Today's conversation is brought to you by Cision, commpro.biz, and Onstream Media. To submit a question or comment at any time during the webinar, please click on the Ask a Question button on the bottom of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the Submit button. Alternatively, you can join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag AskGaryV. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to today's host, Heidi Sullivan, Senior VP and Product Lead, Content, E-commerce, and Distribution at Cision. Heidi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. We are really excited to have you today for an absolutely terrific webinar, The Do's and Don'ts of Social ROI. This is the ultimate holy grail, as I think so many of us, as new social technologies emerge and different methodologies and activities emerge, we always want to jump on board, but frequently the ROI thought comes later of really figuring out why we're doing what we're doing and what we're getting out of it. So we really could not have a better guest today. I am super excited to introduce an absolute star, Gary Vaynerchuk, who builds businesses. Right out of college, he took his family wine business and grew it from a $3 million to a $60 million business in just 5 years. Now he runs VaynerMedia, one of the world's hottest digital agencies. And along the way, he's become a prolific angel investor and venture capitalist, investing in companies like Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Uber, Birchbox, before eventually co-founding VaynerRC, which is a $25 million angel fund. If that's not enough, many of you are probably familiar with his Ask Gary V podcast, and he is here to help us all today. So without further ado, I'd just like to welcome Gary, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So just to kick it off, Gary, before we dive into all the wonderful questions that are coming through, can you give us just some of your thoughts and general guidelines when it comes to social ROI and some of those do's and don'ts?
You know, this is like my favorite subject matter because when I got into what is now considered social media, which for some of you that are listening, you recall it was called Web 2.0, what surprised me was that people were treating it with less vigor for ROI. And, you know, I come from a background where growing a family business and being a retail merchant, there only is ROI. There's no reports. There's no awards. It's did I sell more wine or didn't I, right? And so all my behavior has always been predicated on an actual sale or a transaction or a donation or whatever you're trying to achieve. Obviously, if I've tried to build awareness for brand purposes, that's a different story. But under the context of business, you know, I think the do's and don'ts break down very simply. I don't want to make this anticlimactic, but at its highest level, you know, the do's are actually have the ability to connect the dots to say this tweet or this picture on Instagram or this infographic on Pinterest or this white paper on LinkedIn or this video on YouTube or this post on Facebook or this snap on Snapchat directly correlated to the business objective at hand, which was a transaction or brand building from the impression standpoint. And the don'ts are leave it up to reporting or chance or lack of education or not understanding the practitionership it takes to be successful in these platforms. To me, it's no different than TV, radio, print, banner ads, email marketing. You know, it's just all the same game. The problem is for a lot of people that are on the call and a lot of people that are in the game, they're stuck in one of two places. They actually aren't that good at social content, creative, and strategy, and they don't want the scoring card on the table because they want to work through hyperbole. Or two, you know, they're just at a place where they just don't know how to do it, or they're doing so many other behaviors they don't know how to isolate their social content creation and allocation of funds versus their TV, their print, their radio, their direct mail, and they don't know how to unwind the ROI of any of these things. And then going into, you know, into Fortune 500 land with my agency VaynerMedia in the last 5 years, it's been a little eye-opening on how hard it is for my clients to figure out where to spend their money properly. I think I had a huge advantage of being trained in a retail environment. And obviously, if you're a telco or a large brand, it becomes more and more challenging. But I think the biggest don't underestimate what social media is. All that social media is, for everybody that's listening, and I see a lot of people tweeting, all social media is it's a slang term for the current state of the internet, right? I mean, that's really what it is. Social media is a term we use for websites that actually have the attention of our consumers. So the don'ts are, don't underestimate it. The do's are, put it through the ringer. Like, force it to prove to you that it creates transactions. I'm looking at a report right now for an Instagram account I created called @WineDeals. I'm looking at it right this second as I'm talking to you guys, and I see that on August 17th, 10 people used the code that was on the Instagram photo, and we sold 101 bottles, and 3 items that day, 12 codes, 129 bottles, 20 codes, 590 bottles. Those are 3 Instagram posts. It's black and white. They're transactional. So, that's obviously easy because I'm an e-com and a retailer. For the bigger brands out here where they can't see the whole funnel, start creating campaigns that force social to prove the ROI.
Can you give us an example of that? If you were a brand that wasn't, say, e-com or retail, where you're tracking that right through?
I mean, look, we have some Fortune 100 companies that sell jet engines or huge neuroscience products or cars, where we can literally track the following transaction, which is, we put out a piece of content, they clicked it, it led them to a landing page, which gave either a cookie to that browser that we were able to remarket to a salesperson within the organization that led to a call that led to a sale. So, I've got to be honest with you, I'm weirdly not frustrated. I just I've kind of awoken to this reality, which is both agencies and clients don't want anything to prove out the ROI because it's a safer place for executives and agencies to play it. I live in a day where all our clients, at least I'm trying to force them into having us prove out transactions. But yeah, I mean, we've sold, multi-million-dollar items through social content on LinkedIn and Facebook by properly cooking them, putting them into a sales funnel, and allowing the sales organization of that company to then go and sell. And so the social content was the gateway drug to the transaction.
Very cool. On that note, other than just a reticence to adopt metrics and measurement, do you see any social ROI advice out there that just really doesn't work?
Yes. I think you have a lot of romance in the market right now, right? And there's a lot of youngsters that want to claim they're social media experts who've never sold a thing in their lives. There's a lot of executives in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who are poo-pooing these platforms with never using them in their lives. And so I think there's a lot of hyperbole about impressions, about retweets, likes. I mean, there's literally people giving people advice that having a big base matters when width is completely contrary to the value of social. It's completely predicated on depth. I think there's a stunning lack of understanding that this is much more about consumer data and insights than people recognize. There's an outlandish misunderstanding of the contextual creative needed to be successful in these platforms. The same video is not going to play on a TV commercial as it is on Facebook, as it is on Instagram, as it is on Snapchat. You've got different audiences. You've got different contexts and levers that you can pull. You can grab someone's attention the first 3 seconds of a Facebook video. There's just a million different variables. So, the truth is, and I'm trying to hedge here because I don't want people on this call to think I'm a jerk or audacious. But there's a lack of practitionership in the marketplace right now. You've got a lot of digital agencies, claiming they do social because that's where the money's going, that still have too high of a romance on high-cost production of creative, which is a friction point to the need of volume and testing that social creates through amazing targeting in a Facebook environment. So, yeah, I mean, I think, look, I've been able to grow the agency from 30 to 600 people in 4 years. Basically, and I didn't know what I was doing in agency world. I've done it because of lack of competition for competent understanding on how social layers into a business world today.
It's definitely a new world for agencies and really thinking about all of this. So,
and for clients, right? Clients are stuck in accepting reporting from a modeling mix around their media spend that isn't factoring in the depth that social creates versus the width of other digital products like YouTube pre-roll or banner, and definitely print, radio, television, or PR impressions. A lot of black magic in the historical 70 years of traditional media, even the early stages of the internet. And so I think quant-based marketing is here, but I do want to say this. As much as I'm pushing that, I don't actually think of myself as a performance marketer. I do think of myself a little bit more like a brand marketer. But I think that we all have to reconcile on this call that data is here, and knowing what to do with big data, not collecting big data, but knowing what to do with big data has become a skill set that is absolutely going to be a differentiator from the winners and losers in the new marketing landscape.
Fair enough. So we have some great questions from the audience here. Let's actually kick it off with some Instagram questions. And you gave the example of wine deals. We did have a question from Stuart on what you're using for reporting for at wine deals. Is it your own software? How are you tracking all of that?
So that's an easy one, Stuart, because it's driving directly to an e-com business and retail store that I own, right? So I have the full funnel. And this is the part where I have a lot of empathy for a lot of the telco, B2B, big brands that sell in 1,000 places. Wine deals, the data I just gave you was very easy. We post a photo on Instagram at Wine Deals. There's a code to use to get the heavily reduced price, and then it gets sent to an e-com site that we own, and it's very easy for us to see the transactions, black and white. And so no reporting needed. And so that's just a true answer to that. I think the best thing that I can replicate that for is I'll give you two examples, one for CPGs, one for bigger companies that don't see it through the funnel and have different things. One, and have sales organizations. One, create content, long form, especially on Medium, LinkedIn, Facebook. Cookie those people, retarget them with a right hook, which is an actual offer. When they click that gets them into a sales funnel, and then have that in your Salesforce or whatever you're using to track conversions. That's a black and white way to do ROI. Or if you're a CPG client, if you're a catch-up, create a campaign that's only in Houston, Texas, only driving people to H-E-B supermarkets, and then look at your data of showing what you've been selling consistently for the last 52 weeks, and then try to create a controlled environment where you can feel the effects of your Facebook and Instagram creative driving actual sales in retail.
On a similar note with Instagram, what's your strategy for tagging? I have a specific question on how vital it is to tag other relevant profiles with the image tag option, but how does that work in your work?
I'm a bigger fan of hashtags because it creates discovery. Tagging people is fine. They'll get that notification. But that lends itself to pretty aggressive spamming culture, and I think that people are starting to tune that out. No look, I mean, we're all narcissists, and no look. But, again, tagging lends itself to me on impressions and width-based mentality versus hashtags, which to me is more depth-based activity. So if I'm going to hashtag, neuroscience, if I'm going to hashtag burger compliment, or if I'm going to hashtag beer because I'm doing a beer post, people of that interest are then going to see it and then dig deeper into that piece of content versus you've growth hacked somebody by tagging them to force create an awareness play. And I don't think people are in today's marketing world contextualizing the value of each impression properly. All impressions are equal. if you're wasting someone's time by tagging them to goat them into your content, they may the amount of people that I unfollow, block mentally, I don't kind of do it physically, or have completely checked out from ever doing business with that have tried to tag me to create awareness is overwhelming. And so all those impressions have led to negative outcomes, not positive outcomes.
Makes sense. So since we're using wine deals on Instagram as an example, we have a couple of related questions. So was that promo code that you used only posted on Instagram with no other way to get it? Is that how you're tracking exactly what sales came from that?
Yes.
Easy enough. That was from Bryce.
And Bryce, the reason I'm doing that is I believe that the thing that I live on, my friends that are listening here, is I live on the attention graph. Show me where people's attention is. I want to over-index on figuring it out before everybody else. My belief is that Instagram is the number one dominant player right now on the attention graph. What that means is people are really paying attention to the creative that's showing up in their feed. So because of that, and because the supply and demand of spam versus good content hasn't broken yet on Instagram, and it will, ads are coming, fatigue will kick in, something new will pop up. I did this because I believe that Instagram is disproportionately valuable in the attention graph, and so that's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm controlling it just to Instagram, because that's the platform that I'm betting on.
So then once you're on that platform, when you're tracking it back, I did have a question from Brian here on whether you mainly use Google Analytics to track social media to actual conversions or if there are other tools you're using.
Yeah, I think Google Analytics is incredibly effective. I think, obviously when you're cooking a browser and kind of remarketing to them and then watching their behavior, to me it's about creating a catch-all. Right? I mean, the thing that we're tracking the most, B2B companies that have sales forces, we're driving them into the sales funnel. They're getting tagged on impact, and then if a sale is being created, we get the kind of the credit for the pass, right? Obviously, the salesperson, the human on the other line is getting credit for the close, but we've primed the lead. But yeah, Google Analytics is as strong as anything. I think people are paying a lot of money for a lot of other things that are just layered on and are enterprise software plays.
Gary, I'm going to switch gears here a little, and I know we've already talked about this to an extent, but we're getting a lot of questions on non-retail, non-e-com products. So I'm going to read you two questions, and then maybe we can group them together. So this is actually from Press Kitchen on Twitter, said, how do you track social media ROI when your goal is awareness, when you don't have products to sell? And then on a similar note, Gisela said, if I have a B2B client that sells commercial beverage equipment, what are the best channels and how do I actually demonstrate some of that effectiveness?
I mean, every single platform gives you awareness metrics, right? I mean, you're seeing how many impressions are happening, and then you can layer the depth of that awareness by looking at the social engagements and create a ratio of how many likes, shares, comments, links versus how many impressions Facebook or Instagram or these things are claiming. So, Twitter and Facebook are giving you outward data on that right now. Instagram is not there yet, but it will be momentarily. And so, general awareness plays are pretty easy. I mean, you can literally search your brand's name. There's the Radiant 6, there's reporting, there's tons of that kind of stuff. I mean, I think the bigger question is on that stuff, what next, right? Is your awareness creating the behavior that you want? Again, I think marketing has been lazy because of traditional inabilities to connect the pipes, and people are just throwing out metrics. I mean, to me, what scares me with social media metrics, and way scarier on traditional metrics, is they're going to show you impressions, but do they actually consume it, right? A TV commercial can claim 10 million impressions during the last episode of Colbert, but the reality is every time Colbert went to commercial, everybody on this call grabbed their phone and emailed about work or tweeted about what Colbert said or looked on Twitter to see what others were saying. They didn't actually consume that impression. So general awareness is a tricky one, but there's plenty of reports. Now, as to the beverage play, what I would do is I would create content. I would reverse engineer the customer. So if they're selling beverage equipment, I would figure out who could possibly buy this, which I assume is something that client very much knows. What's great about B2B is you have a small subset of people that are actually going to buy your product, so you can target them very easily. And what I mean by that is I would create a white paper or a video that actually brought quality content to that person. So let's pretend we're going after restaurant owners. I would create a slide share or a video and that would say 8 things restaurant owners can do to save money to the bottom line. And I would literally spend a week, a month, whatever it takes, to produce an incredible white paper that talked about tax breaks that 98% of small business owners don't know about, or other efficiencies around electricity that if they just change their bulbs out, they would save $800 a year in the normal bodegas around the country. Whatever it may be, then I would create that white paper on SlideShare, which is owned by LinkedIn, and then I would post it on LinkedIn, and I would target people that have occupations as restaurateurs. And then I would target on Facebook people that put in that they work at XYZ companies that reflect companies that are hot leads for our business. I mean, it is literally that tactical. Like, you can literally get there, but most people are just trying to amass followers on Facebook and Twitter and then just post and see what happens.
So on that note, and when you're talking about the different posts, we did have from Georgiana, does every tweet, Facebook post, Instagram post need to result back to a sale, or is there a balance between sales and relationship building?
Yeah, I mean, my last book was called Jab, 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 Right Hook, right? And the whole premise was give, and then ask. So, no, I don't think every post should. And actually, I think that is what social media's advantage is. It's not as cost-intensive as a print ad, as a radio ad, as a commercial, which forces you then to make everything a call to action if you want to create a transaction. And what has forced a lot of other people to spend a lot of money just on brand building and hasn't resulted in moving the business. And so, I really do think the last 50, 60 years of marketing and over the next 50 to 60 years is going to be considered the dark ages where people really wasted good money. And so I think this is what's so special about the era that we're all marketing in, guys, which is, no, you don't have to. And engagement matters. Actual, like, literally, old school handshaking, which is engaging with, like, right now, I want to engage with Irina Jordan on Twitter because she's listening, and I just did, and I smiled, and that mattered to her, right? Like, that's a real thing. That's how business actually gets, done. And Ravi Ganesh, he just posted something, and I'm just putting a smiley face and saying, thanks for mentioning that thing I just mentioned on the call. Interacting with Georgia's Sylvia, like this is Georgia's Sylvia, excuse me. These are really important things. So social creates, depth, width, engagement and sales. So no, I don't think every post should, but I do think any post that you're going to spend targeting money against, you should highly consider it. And that's really where it's special, and that's why Facebook has separated itself. Facebook ads are so targeted, so well done, that you can really make them quite transactional, and you're pouring in thousands of dollars, hundreds of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars if you're a big company. So you want those things to have those impacts. Or maybe you're going for massive awareness. I'm doing the Ask Gary Vee show, and I'm running Facebook ads against some of those episodes and seeing enormous results. And all I'm doing there is building awareness around my content, which will later create demand for me to speak, which drives revenue for me selling my books, or maybe nothing at all, which is fine. So I think what it has to do is it has to map your objectives. And, and I think that's that.
Absolutely. I always say, social media is exactly that. It's social. So, and talking a lot about those interactions really becomes so important in everything we do. So question from Twitter, Anastasia says, is owning a hashtag important, or is that even a thing anymore? Hashtags are best used to discover and join conversations, right?
I had an adamant point of view on this and still do. There's no such thing as owning a hashtag. Like if I said right now, hashtag, Ask Gary Vee, somebody can use that right now on Twitter, and then they own it, right? I mean, there's no owning a hashtag. That's not how hashtag works. It's a context builder. It is an absolute way to get discovered if you understand how to make the rest of your content ladder up into that hashtag, and that is a hashtag that a lot of people click to search and discover. So it was never a thing. It's 100% not a thing right now. and it's a context builder. It can be used strategically. I think it's very prominent on Instagram and something people should really try to learn if they want to have people discover them and create organic following. So that's my answer to that.
When we talk about different platforms, Samantha wants to know whether you're suggesting unique content per social media outlet or whether you would run the same content across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth.
One more time, that chopped. I apologize.
I'm sorry?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Oh, sure. Would you suggest using unique content on different social media outlets, or would you run the same content across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so on and so forth?
I'm getting to plug my book a lot on this call, which makes me happy. Literally the only reason I wrote Jab, 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 Right Hook was for this issue. To use the same piece of content and then to use social networks as distribution for that content is a grave mistake, and probably the number one mistake most people are doing because they don't have time or the money to invest in creative that is contextual per platform. But I'm going to paint everybody a picture right now, and I think it's going to make a ton of sense, and it will tell you why you should never do that again. I mean, listen, it's not the worst. I mean, let me rephrase. You can do it. It's not going to be as effective, and it probably dilutes your overall message, especially if somebody sees it twice at some level. And you can argue that that seeing it twice brings you value, but let me play this out. Everybody sit down and think for a second. I'm seeing a lot of people that I'm interacting with right now on Twitter around this seminar. So you are, a 25 to 42-year-old female. When you go to Pinterest, you're the same person you are as when you go to Twitter and as when you go to Facebook, but your psychology, your mentality, why you're there is fundamentally different, right? On Pinterest, you have aspiration to buy, to browse. There's almost a retail intent, a discovery for major events intent. Your mind's in a different place. Facebook, you're keeping up with your world, your friends, your family, a little bit of a tougher place to actually sell in if you don't know how to do it properly. And then Twitter, a lot of times you're keeping up with celebrities or other media content or, things of that nature. So I think that the thing that people don't understand is, first, the same content doesn't play everywhere because the room is different. You may wear a suit to your job because you have to, but when you go out that night to the hottest club in New York City, you're probably not going to want to wear that same attire, and that's why your content doesn't work across all platforms.
So I have a question here to kind of shift gears from some of the bigger examples we've been looking at. Jasmine says, for a new business who lacks a following on social, how can they start to build that following?
Well, I think it's engagement and content. It's a really simple formula. It's kind of like working out. Like, nobody on this call is confused what it takes to get a six-pack or to get muscles or to lose 15 pounds. Not a soul. It's just hard to do, right? People don't want to put in the work. So it's very easy to get a following. You engage with content that is relevant to you, and when you actually engage with it, instead of liking it or starring it, just as a growth hacking mechanism, no, you add to it and you actually say something about it, and then the person thinks that you did a good job, and then they follow you because you brought some value to a conversation. And then you put out good content that starts conversations. It's really quite basic. The problem is some companies and some people aren't talented enough. Think about every conversation you've ever had. Not everybody was interesting or brought value to it. And number two, it takes a ton of work. It's real-life work. So no secrets here. Do push-ups, do sit-ups, eat high protein, don't eat fat. But, doing it is a lot harder than saying it.
Absolutely. I think we only have time for a couple more questions, but I do have a couple of questions on Facebook dark posts. Lizzie asked what the best platform for managing Facebook dark post campaigns, if that's always the right hook or whether that's the jab, jab, jab.
Yeah. Yep. So both up to you. Depends on how much money you have. If you have limited money, I think you should seriously consider doing right hooks. But I think that what you want to do that through is page editor right inside of Facebook. You don't have to do that anywhere else.
Excellent. So then just finishing up here, I think we have time for one more question. There's, again, a lot of great questions on measuring ROI when it's not a specific offer, but maybe what I'll actually do is highlight that we have a couple of examples here of nonprofits, of a real estate agency, grassroots advocacy. So I don't know if you have any kind of call to action suggestions for people outside of a typical buy now or e-com situation.
So I think the big thing to think about is what are you trying to achieve? So I would tell you that NGOs and nonprofits, I think, are at the top of the worst execution on social because they kind of default into just assuming that if you ping people, you can guilt them into donations, you can just pound them, no context, no flirting, no first date. It just goes in for the right hook, like, hey Gary V, give us $500 for this. Like, I don't know who you are. There's nothing. There's no content. Whether it's you're running for a political office, whether you're trying to get $500 donations, whether you're trying to get charity donations for your school's fundraiser, uniforms donated, selling flowers, whatever it is, it's the same kind of philosophy, which is you have to, guys. Let me get on a soapbox here, and I just think everybody's going to get this. You have so much more leverage in life when you provide value first, for when you then go in for the ask. And if you live with that theory, I mean, I'm on family vacation. I am emphatically saying no to all sorts of things that are taking away from my time. You guys asked me to do this. You called me at the right moment. You hustled. You pushed hard. And I'm doing it. Why? Let's talk about why. Why? Because for the hundreds of people that are listening, if I bring value to 17 of them, 4 of which act on it, that is leverage for me and my brand because I know that I have the goods to back it up. And so, I'm paying forward. I'm not looking at the ROI of this 30 minutes. 30 minutes of my life is extremely high cost these days. But I'm not worried or crippled by this transaction. It's about building leverage. It's about being right about these theses. So in 3 years, people on this call say, Gary was right about that when at the time at the call I said he was wrong. So, it's about building leverage, and I think all of you need to take that to heed and say, look, you're not entitled to anything, whether you're a nonprofit. Just because you're not making a profit doesn't mean that people should be shelling out dollars to you. You have to provide value. You have to tell stories. You have to give them rationale, and the best way to do that is to create content and to engage.
Well, I can personally say, Gary, that you have provided us with tremendous value. So thank you for taking the time out and joining us today. Is there anything in closing, any parting advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
To have patience. It takes time. I mean, I love how everybody thinks this stuff happens overnight. I put out a year and a half worth of 40-minute wine videos every day on YouTube before anybody noticed. And so don't worry about how many followers you have. You could have 4,000 followers or you could have 8, but one of those 8 followers could be the president of ABC News or Oprah Winfrey's best friend, and they could pass on a piece of content that changes your life. Think about this in a much more 360 way, and just have patience. If you believe in what you're doing, if you're enjoying it, if you believe in what you're doing, then you will win.
Excellent. Well, again, I can't thank you enough, and there were so many fabulous questions today. Please come back to commpro.biz. We will work together to get to any questions that we haven't had answered today to provide some more insight. And on behalf of Cision, on behalf of everyone today, thanks again, Gary, and thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webcast. We thank you for your participation. You may disconnect your lines at this time, and have a great day.